In this course, I'll take you through Agile methodologies. The main agenda is talking about what is Agile and the kind of methodologies that are in Agile, and specifically about Scrum methodology. I'll be discussing about the various roles that people play in Agile Scrum and the kind of ceremonies that are being conducted as part of Scrum methodology and the artifacts that are being created as part of Scrum. Let's start with the problem. Why do we need Agile? So we keep thinking about answering one question. How do we get better, faster? So you want better user experience and better efficiency. At the same time, you want to reduce the time needed for achieving those efficiencies. So Agile is an answer to the question, how do we get better, faster? What is Agile? Agile is essentially an iterative and an incremental approach that can be applied to project management as well as software development. Iterative meaning it is done in iterations. In each iteration, there will be an incremental improvement to the existing product. And for every iteration, there is a clearly time box where you define what you want to finish in that particular time box. This is a very popular technique used in software development and project management. It's all about cross-functional and self-adjusting teams. By cross-functional, what I mean is each team member will be performing a different function. One could be developer, one could be tester, one could be sales, one could be an architect, and so on and so forth. So essentially, the teams are self-adjusting and self-organizing. They adjust based on what they observe. And Agile is mainly based on a set of values and principles. Agile is all about a culture where certain values and principles are regarded very high and applied to achieve better outcomes. Agile is based on the concept that everyone is a leader. There are no special leaders or special followers. Everyone in the team is a leader and has a role to play in the process. And the main focus is on the outcome that is expected out of the task that you perform. So you always start with the end in the mind. So there are certain attributes to Agile. Teams think about what they want to do. They prepare before starting the work. They adjust to the change. They reflect on various aspects. They reflect on how they performed earlier. They learn from it. They all collaborate on a common goal. And the other important aspect is measuring. So you always measure how well you did. So it's bad to copy in an examination, but it's always good to follow or copy best practices from other teams. It's important that you have an interaction with other teams, understand the best practices they follow, and apply them for your own teams. Agile is all about agreeing on a social contract on the process you plan to work on. So it's about finalizing and everyone trusting each other, respecting each other, and having the courage to uh, to have to understand conflict and to be open to feedback. So these are some attributes that the team need to have. One has to have respect for the others in the team and their opinions and accept the kind of feedback that they give. One should have the courage to ask about, in case you disagree with the other team member, you should have the courage to talk about it and come up with new ideas or changing the existing way things are being done. It's important to be open to change and also open to everyone. And agile teams are built based on the trust that's being established on one another. And having these qualities in an agile team is you will definitely get great outcomes out of it. So Agile Manifesto is based on four major values. The first value is Agile believes in individuals and their interactions rather than static processes and tools. It is the team members will who will change the way things happen, and it's based on the interactions with the team members that you can come up with better ways to solve a problem. So it gives great value to individuals and their interactions. And in Agile, the focus is on working software over comprehensive documentation. Agile does not believe in having a large amount of documentation, but the outcome, or you need to show what's the working software instead of showing the comprehensive documentation. You don't have to prepare huge amounts of documentation, but that doesn't mean that there is no documentation altogether. There is minimal documentation that's needed, and the main focus is on working software rather than documentation. And there is high value in customer collaboration over contract negotiation. This is because you make customers or the stakeholders part of your process. You provide an opportunity for them to give feedback at various stages of your project. After each iteration, you will invite all the stakeholders to showcase what you have done in that particular iteration and take feedback from them. And it's all about responding to change rather than following a plan. So Agile encourages change and ways to respond to that change. It's not about following a static plan that's always there. You will always be open to change and respond to change, adapt, and you try to make the best out of what's planned and what needs change. And then Agile Manifesto talks about 12 principles of Agile. The first principle is customer satisfaction. This can be achieved by early and continuous delivery of valuable software. With every iteration, you will be delivering a portion of the software. And having said that, because the iterations are time bound and are not too big, it's possible that customer is satisfied because he gets a portion of the product early and also can provide feedback on it. And Agile Principle 2 talks about changing requirements. So even in late development, if there are any changes in requirement, Agile will be able to adapt to those changing requirements. In water cycle model, it's hard if anything changes in a later stage of development because it's all one way. You can't you'll have to go back and start a new cycle again. So it's really hard to make changes at the later stages of development. And the third principle is about developing working software frequently. Instead of months or years in case of water cycle, in case of Agile, it's only weeks, so it's very less, and you have something to look at and give feedback on within weeks rather than months. So you have the opportunity to deliver working software frequently. And principle 4 is about daily cooperation between business owners and developers. So your end stakeholders can also participate in any of the agile ceremonies and give feedback, and you can cooperate with one another to get the best product out. Principle number 5 is about motivated individuals who should be trusted. So projects are built not based on processes and tools, but people who can be trusted and who are very motivated for a common cause, and they agreed for a social contract. And agile principle 6 is about co-located teams. So this is the best form of agile where the whole team is at the same geographical location. So this will encourage face-to-face conversation and resolve any issues. This makes it very easy, but this is not a hard and fast rule. Sometimes due to labor expenses, it's possible that teams are spread across geographies and they have to cooperate digitally, have calls and have conference calls, etc. And Agile Principle 7 is how do we measure success? We measure success by working software and not by some documentation. So that changes the whole landscape. So you have something tangible and something that you can appreciate. You have working software that you can review and use and give some feedback. And it's also based on a principle called sustainable development. Since the iterations are small, the work allocations are small, it's accountable and development is sustainable, and you can maintain a constant pace of improvement. With every iteration you can show incremental growth. The ninth principle is about focus and attention on technical excellence and good design. So Agile focuses on giving the best design and also on technical excellence. Principle number 10 is about simplicity. It's all about prioritizing the workload or the backlog. You want to figure out which particular backlog should be done in a particular iteration, and by simplifying the whole process, only considering what needs to be done and rejecting the rest in a product backlog will really help in maintaining the focus and finishing the iteration and the work on time. So with Agile, you look for best architectures, and the requirements and designs are not created at the beginning of the project. Rather, they adopt and emerge from self-organizing and self-adjusting teams, and they evolve with the process. Principle number 12 is about reflection. The team continues to reflect on how to become more effective. This is done through regular meetings about what went well and what did not go well, and then based on the feedback an action plan is created and the team can adjust accordingly. So coming back to our original topic, agile methodologies, I'll discuss in this a particular methodology which is called Scrum. This is essentially an agile framework where the whole work is divided into time boxed iterations. So the first step in this would be to create a product backlog. This is done by product owner, which I'll discuss in a little later. So once you create the whole chunk of work, which is the product backlog, you have something called a sprint planning meeting where the product owner would prioritize what tasks or what particular work items need to be completed in a particular sprint, and then he will create a sprint backlog. The whole team will help with that, and then they estimate the amount of work that needs to be done in that sprint, and then the sprint begins. A sprint can typically be between 1 to 4 weeks, and it's an iteration and it keeps cycling. Once first sprint is complete, then the next sprint will start. When a particular sprint is completed, the team members will showcase the work that they have done. Finished work will be showcased in a sprint review meeting, and then there will be a sprint retrospective where they will discuss what went wrong or what went well and prepare a development plan for the next sprint. And on a regular basis, every 24 hours there will be something called a daily scrum where each team member will talk about what they did the previous day and the next day and what they plan to do the current day, and if there are any blockers. So that explains the overall agile scrum process. And scrum is just a framework, and there is something called kanban, which is signboard in Japanese language. It's essentially a lean method that can be used to manage and visualize your work items. So each work item will be placed in a particular pipeline. You can create a pipeline of items. For example, pipeline will start with a backlog, and then someone will take this work item and then move it to the next pipeline, which is in progress. So a team member assigns work item to themselves and they'll move this item into in progress, and then once the work is complete, they can assign it to other team members for peer review, and once that's done, the item will move to testing phase where tester would test if the functionality is right, and then it will move to done state, which means the item has been complete. So one important pipeline here is blocked. So if some work items are blocked on something or someone, they will be moved to this pipeline. So all the team members will be constantly monitoring this pipeline to see if some work item is blocked on them, and they will try to remove those blocked items. So it's a simple and easy way to visualize how progress is being made and how many work items are in the backlog, how many are in progress, and it's just to visualize the overall progress from start to finish. Now let's discuss the next topic, which is Scrum roles. So these are roles that a team members in a Scrum team would pick. So there will be one product owner, one Scrum master, and the rest of the team members will be part of the team. So let's see each role in detail. The first role is product owner. Product owner is a subject matter expert on the technology, on the product for which a Scrum team has been formed, and he or she is mainly responsible for three things. The first one is managing the Scrum backlog. Since the product owner is the single point of contact on everything about the product, the product owner would have a clear idea of what work is important for this project or product, and is in a good position to create or to manage the Scrum backlog. So what we have is a product backlog, which is the whole list of work items for the product, and a product owner could prioritize work and pick some of the items into a Scrum backlog. The next important role is release management. So the product owner has a clear direction of where the project is heading towards. He or she has the roadmap and knows how best to deliver value for the customer. The third important aspect is stakeholder management. So the product owner has to manage and balance the needs of stakeholders. Stakeholders could be end users or sponsor users or customers, and the team itself. So product owner is like a bridge between the customers or end users and the actual development team. And the other important aspect of a product owner is the product owner has to provide feedback for all the work that has been showcased as part of sprint review meetings. This feedback is really important because product owner is essentially an architect or a subject matter expert on the product and should be able to guide the team and convey on behalf of the end user what the product should look like and what kinds of improvements are important, and this feedback will be used by the whole team for the upcoming sprints. The next role is Scrum Master. Scrum Master is neither a servant nor a leader, but a servant leader. So this role mainly serves the product owner in planning the sprint as well as the sprint review meetings. Product owner plays a very important role on a daily basis. The product owner has to look at any blockers that the team has and has to remove the obstacles so that the team can smoothly complete the tasks that are assigned to them. It's essentially a people-centric role. The Scrum Master will act as a coach. If needed, will teach and facilitate daily stand-ups, reviews and retrospective meetings. So Scrum Master plays an important role because he or she directly talks to the whole team on a daily basis and understands their challenges and tries to address any challenges. Challenges could be like machines are not available, need an extra machine, or could be technical, could be questions about the requirements, could be anything. So Scrum Master plays a major role and acts as an interface between the product owner and the team itself. And the last but not the least, it's very critical about the Scrum Master, because the Scrum Master has to protect the teams from any external interruptions. So in order to avoid cycles being lost, so the Scrum Master will act as a shield to ensure that the team is focused on what's planned in the sprint and complete them in time. The team itself. So this is the preferred number of team members is 7 to 10, but it's not a hard and fast rule. And the team could include anyone, like you could have designers, development, UX designers, testers, delivery staff, and you could also have sales, marketing, etc. So a Scrum team could have a variety of cross-functional team members. The main task that the team does is estimating work for the identified stories. So sometimes the team also has to come up with stories for a given work item, and as well as estimate it. The team is also focused on performing the work that has been agreed upon at the beginning of the sprint, and to finish it off in time, and also let the Scrum Master know about any blockers they have on a regular basis and get them removed. It's more about collaboration between the team, so they need to open up and actively participate in all meetings, including review and retrospective meetings. So the team has to trust one another and measure, reflect, think, and adopt. So it's essentially a self-adjusting team and self-organizing team. So they have a go on everything from sprint planning to, so they are free to discuss with the product owner and the Scrum Master of any new ideas or process improvements as well. Now let's go through Agile ceremonies. So there are 4 major ceremonies associated with Agile. The first one is sprint planning, daily stand-up, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. Let's check them out in detail. The first ceremony is sprint planning. This is normally done at the beginning of the sprint, and it's only done once per sprint. This could take anywhere between 1 to 2 hours, and the whole team will be part of this. The product owner plays an important role in determining what work items should be part of this particular sprint, and will move them from the product backlog to the sprint backlog. And product owner, while he or she plays a major role, the team can also help the product owner and suggest what items they would like to see in this sprint. And the team then discusses the stories in detail. One team member would talk about the estimate, will try to estimate effort for a given story, and the rest of the team will also do the same, and they all will have to come up with a consensus on the total number of points for this particular story. So they do this for all stories, and once they have the overall estimate, the sprint planning meeting will be done. So given that a sprint could be between 2 to 4 weeks based on the agreed upon sprint duration, the sprint stories should also be should not be too big, or so that they should be able to complete them within the sprint duration itself. And about estimating points, So there is a method called planning poker which is normally followed, and in planning poker what each team member does is the first team member would describe the scope and the various tasks that are involved with a particular story, and the rest of the team will start giving ballpark figures about the estimate that they think is ideal for this particular story based on the scope. So for example, say for a given story, if one team member says 8 and the other team member says 10 and some other team member says 12, and they could come up with 4 or 5 different numbers, and each one will have to provide the justification on why they think a story is needs more points or less points. Once they give the justification, everyone has to agree upon on a single number, and that will be the estimate for that story. And sprint points could be or might be associated with the number of man hours. So for example, say a particular item requires 5 man days, that could convert into sprint points of 5 sprint points in case of some teams, and in case of some teams that could get that would be equivalent of say 200 points. So points need not be an equivalent in terms of time, and the normal process is in case of sprint points or story points, they follow Fibonacci series. So the points will be like 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, etc. And one observation here is it's important that you don't create stories which are too big. So you need to create stories which can be very small and manageable within a sprint. So if a story is too big, it's better to divide that into multiple stories. And the next important agile ceremony is daily stand-up. This is performed once per day, the beginning of the sprint. And this would be typically 10 to 15 minutes, and it will cover what a team member did yesterday, what they plan to do today, and are there any blockers that are impacting their work. And once this is specified, everyone can try and resolve those blocking issues, remove them out of the way. And this is normally facilitated by the Scrum Master. And this plays an important role because it's about accountability, what everyone is working on a daily basis. This improves daily accountability and is effective for the product to succeed. The next important ceremony is a sprint review. This normally happens at the end of the sprint or a milestone, and this will be typically between 30 to 60 minutes. This is a great opportunity to showcase the work that has been done as part of the sprint. Normally you invite customers and any other stakeholders like people from the sales, technical sales or pre-sales, the product owner, and everyone are invited to participate in this review meeting, and they can, and any demonstrations of the product, the UI or tests that have been run, and anything that's demonstrable, even it could be a design document or an architectural document is being demonstrated, and immediate feedback from the stakeholders is received and captured and then applied in future sprints. So inviting the customer or sponsor users is optional, but it's always encouraged that you do so you can get some early feedback on the product itself. The last ceremony is a sprint retrospective. This is normally again done at the end of the sprint or milestone. This is a really important ceremony in terms of process improvements. So it's typically between 30 to 60 minutes. What happens is it's what's working, what's not working, and are there any puzzles. So each team member will come up with a sticky note or their own points on how the sprint work happened, and did it go well or did it go wrong, what went wrong, what could have been improved. All these things, every team member will have their own opinion and everyone will discuss. and eventually an action plan is created so that that feedback can be applied and actions taken. This ceremony is also facilitated by the Scrum Master. Optionally, the product owner could also be invited to this. Now let's look at the next topic and the last topic for this session, Agile artifacts. So artifacts are special items that are created as part of the Agile Scrum methodology. So there are mainly three artifacts: a product backlog, a sprint backlog, and a Burndown Chart. The first artifact is a product backlog. So initially when the product owner and manager and other stakeholders will have a discussion with the customer or the end user. The customer could be an internal customer or an external customer. The requirements are discussed in great detail, and eventually a big list of work items are created. This list of big work items is called the product backlog. This is something that the customers have requested for, and this is what our roadmap looks like. You want to finish off all the items in the backlog in a given amount of time. So once a product backlog is created, what the product owner does is at the beginning of the sprint there will be a sprint planning meeting where the product owner would prioritize certain items in the product backlog that are being planned to be implemented first and move them to the sprint backlog. So the product backlog generally consists of epics. Epics are essentially large work items with a scope. So it could be a big feature, it could be a number of features that are planned for this particular product. And these epics are too big. They are then broken into stories, where each story talks about an user experience or a particular short requirement. It's in the form of this particular user wants to do this particular thing and gets this particular benefit or outcome out of it. So user stories are simple statements. They have a title which talks about what the story is about and what the short requirement is, and then each story is assigned sprint points. Like I have mentioned previously, they follow planning poker to determine on a specific number of points by coming up with ballpark figures. Every team member has an opinion and gives a point, and then there will be a consensus, and once the consensus is reached, the sprint points are assigned to the story. And this story can be further broken into individual tasks. For example, user registration could be a story. So for user registration you would need a home screen. That could be a task, and then you will need a certain form to be filled for registration, and you need a submit button, and it has to interact with the backend. So all these will be like the various tasks involved in a particular story. And the next important artifact is sprint backlog. So as I explained previously, once the product owner creates a sprint backlog for the upcoming sprint, stories all the team members will estimate the stories and use planning poker and Fibonacci numbers. And then once the prioritized stories are known, the team will agree and commit stories for this milestone. It's important to ensure that before committing, you have to understand that for a given milestone or a sprint, there is an, like say it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and if the story points that do not fit into a particular sprint timelines, then you might have to reconsider and remove some of them, so that stories will fit in that particular milestone. And with as and when the sprint progresses, the sprint backlog will naturally reduce in size. So you'll be removing each backlog item from the sprint and mark them as completed. So that will decrease the number of stories in the sprint backlog. And once the sprint is complete, then the next sprint is created and a new sprint backlog is created, and this process will repeat for every iteration. So the third one is a burndown chart. So what is a burndown chart? So how do we visualize how we are progressing with these sprints, and are we doing good? So managers and upper management would definitely like to know how we are progressing and get some early feedback and get an idea of any possible delays. So for this purpose, we can create a burndown chart. A burndown chart is essentially a chart where points are tracked across a sprint milestone. And you will, so initially when the sprint begins, say the sprint has say 100 points, just for example, say, so it starts with 100 at the beginning of the sprint, and with the x-axis would be time, and as time progresses the 100 will keep reducing, and by the time the sprint ends it should essentially reach 0. So it will be a, you'll observe that it's a slope, it will be going down with time, and this can be used to track progress. If you see that the burndown chart is not moving as expected, that indicates that there is some problem with the team or the projects that are being undertaken, and something needs to be done to fix that. So the overall number of points finished in a particular sprint is called velocity, and this is measured for every sprint. Say for example, you have in the last 6 months had 12 sprints where each sprint is a duration of 14 days. So, and you will be measuring the velocity for all the 12 sprints. Say for the first sprint it was 100, the next sprint it was 90, and then the next sprint it was 80. That clearly indicates a pattern that the productivity is going down, or there are some problems with estimates, or it could be there are some blocking issues or complications involved or change in requirements, and that's one way the upper management will know that something is not going on well, and they need to they need to correct the path. And once they figure it out, and sometimes with, ideally the velocity should grow with sprints, because the team is at the beginning of the whole project, the team is not aware of the requirements clearly, or is there are so many unknowns, so the team doesn't know what technical challenges the team might face in delivering this project, and what kind of new things, new requirements change, or you don't have the full picture at the beginning, so productivity will be low. And with time there will be a growth in you will become an expert in that product and the technology area, and team members are becoming better and collaborating better, and that will help improve the time taken for completing the same task, and that will improve the with time, and the number of points that you will be able to finish per sprint would increase proportionally with the expertise and exposure to the project. And we anticipate that the velocity will grow with time, and that's burndown charts is all about that, and you can quickly visualize the overall progress and how the teams are performing and make improvements accordingly. So that's the third artifact. And that concludes our session. So I'll just summarize what we have learned. We have learned about what is agile culture, and that everyone is a leader. It's all about self-adjusting and self-organizing teams that have respect for each other, have the courage to challenge existing methodologies, and also be open to feedback, apply the feedback. And we have seen how Scrum can be used as an agile framework, where the whole work is divided into iterated time boxes, and each iteration will have a sprint backlog which can be derived from the product backlog. And it's important that everyone focuses on the objectives of that sprint and complete them in time. And there is something called stand-up meetings, and you could visualize what's blocking, talk to people, and collaborate. And we have seen how Kanban boards work with pipelines. And then we discussed about the various roles in Scrum: product owner, Scrum master, and the team. Product owner is responsible and is a subject matter expert of the product and the technology, and also will ensure that everything is prioritized with the end user in mind. So we'll always consider stakeholders' views and changing requirements, and will let the team know about the priorities, and also give feedback to the team on the work that they have delivered. And the next role was Scrum Master, which Scrum Master plays a very important role, a people person, a servant leader, and has to collaborate, teach, coach, and facilitate all these ceremonies that are conducted, and also shield the team from external influences, and let the team prosper and develop on agreed upon goals. And then the team itself, everyone is a leader. They can share their opinion, they can participate in prioritizing the work, they can participate in estimating the work to be done, as well as do the actual work, collaborate with one another, so on and so forth. And then we have discussed about Scrum ceremonies. These are a great way. So there are 4 different ceremonies. So you start with the sprint planning and prepare a sprint backlog out of it, and everyone in the team participates in it. Product owner prioritizes the work for that particular sprint. And then we have seen how a stand-up calls will be efficient for daily accountability and solving problems, resolving issues. And then we saw how sprint review meetings can be used to improve the quality of the product based by taking feedback from all stakeholders and the product owner. Then we saw sprint retrospective, which will be used to develop the overall process and any methodologies used. So the team will come up with some process improvements and how we can do the upcoming iteration better than the one that we did for the previous iteration. And then we discussed about Scrum artifacts. So we in the process of Scrum, we do create certain artifacts. Although we go with minimal design, and we have some of the design documents and design stories, where we'll come up with some basic designs that you can showcase and get it reviewed. In general, we have some special artifacts, which are the product backlog itself, which is a representation of all the work items involved in that product. Then you have a sprint backlog, which is a backlog of work items that are specific to a particular sprint. And then you have burndown charts, which are used to measure the velocity of a particular milestone. So the how fast are we finishing off the work items in a particular sprint, and this is useful for higher management and any managers out there to understand the speed at which the project is moving, and can take and can make some decisions or improvements, or have conversations with the team, and also appreciate the team for the progress. Yeah, I think that's all about it, and hope you all had a good understanding of Scrum, and particularly Agile culture and the methodologies used, like the Scrum framework. Thank you and have a great time.